think of a train that goes in like full speed. You cannot really stop a train or change it rapidly. When you're working on an engine, you're kind of like laying tracks in front of the train. Think of features are like people that like jumping on the train. This running train, the upside of this is it really allows you to focus.
How often the code changes within some parts of the engine?
If you have 10 programmers and you pay them money, you expect them to write code, right? So they're gonna write code every single day.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into games industry? Why games, by the way? Like, why not web development, for example? And tell me a little bit about your story.
All right. So I'm gonna start with saying that I'm old enough to remember that, to play games on your computer, you actually had to like type in commands. My
Oh,
first PC that my parents bought me was 386 with no hard drive, no Windows. It was just pure DOS. So, whenever I wanted to play games, I had to put floppy disks, like copy the content to the RAM drive or even unpack it. So that was how I learned how to interact with computers. We just like type in commands. Uh, so that was kind of like my introduction to programming, you can say. Also, my mom was a programmer, which was very interesting back in Poland in those
yeah.
days. She was doing like a database stuff in some really niche programming language, I think called Clipper. So when
What?
when I said to my elementary teacher, like, "Hey, my mom's programming this weird language," he's like, "Dude, you should like learn C or something." And he recommended me a book. So yeah, I went. There was like one store in Warsaw selling computer books. Uh, I took the bus there. I bought myself a book, and this is how I started.
Nice. Okay. This is wild to have mom as a programmer also in Poland. It's so out of this world.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think, after C, there was like a big book on C++. And that there's something like weirdly click with me when they were describing classes and inheritance. Like, hey, it's a car. It can be a sports car or luxury car. And like immediately in my head, I had like, oh, this is like games, cars and moving. I can program this. I'm gonna start my game, class, car, and stuff like that. Um, so that was kind of like how I started doing like super simple things. Somehow on my journey, I got interested in emulation and started writing my own little emulators. Um, but then actually, like my first real job was I was working on writing software for like energy companies, like reports and stuff, and I was so bored out of my mind. And it's like the point I don't want to do it anymore. But then one of my colleagues just like found a job in the games industry. I think for he left for People Can Fly. It's like, Marcin, games are great. It's so fun. And then I was like, huh, I remember I always wanted to make games. There's a career now. But it's like career. There was, I think, 3 game companies in Warsaw at that time. So it was like CD Projekt Red, People Can Fly, and I think City Interactive back then. So I sent my resume to all 3 of them, and only CD Projekt responded. I got an interview. It was really tough. I thought I knew how to program, but the guy was just like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. But I got a job as a junior programmer, and yeah, I
Nice.
stayed in AAA since then.
Okay. Can we do a bit of a segue? Can you tell me what is the intended CD Projekt slash CD Project way of pronouncing this name now when you're speaking English? Because to me this
Oh, I
is
have
just
no
like
idea.
this is
I
just a disaster.
I think they say CD Project.
Okay.
but for me, it's CD Projekt, right? So
Yeah. Okay.
you
All
should
right.
ask some from them.
All right. I thought that like as your first day, you'll get like, okay, if you're speaking English, you need to pronounce it this way. Because to me this is so confusing. I never know. I just always say both. Say both like CD
Yeah.
Projekt, CD
Um,
Project, and
to be fair, I worked there 10 years ago. No more, 15 years ago. So there was no English speaking people back then.
okay.
So we were all saying CD Projekt.
Okay. Okay. Nice. So what happened next? What did you work there on and what happened next?
Uh, I worked on The Witcher 2, which I like to say it was the last Witcher before the famous one. But it was still a great game. It was judging by today's standards, a small, scrappy team that were trying to prove, that Polish peoples can make games that are like good enough. Um, that was pretty fun time. I learned the most. I probably learned the most from my entire career during my times there, because the team was so small. You had to do everything. There was no like gameplay team, engine team, tools team. There was just like I think 15 to 20 programmers just had to write an engine, write all the tooling, make
Oh,
the game run
really?
fast on PC. Yeah,
Okay. Interesting. I didn't realize that because Witcher 2 was quite a big game.
it was. Yes. Again, judging probably in modern standards, you would say it's like, oh, maybe double A because it's pretty linear. It's not open world, right? But yeah, I still have a sweet spot for this game in my
Okay.
heart for sure.
Okay. What happened next?
Next, I'm gonna skip some boring parts. So I was recruited by Ubisoft Toronto, from Canada. And it was one of those times. I think LinkedIn just started, and I got a message like, "Hey, Ubisoft is interested in you." It's like, oh my god. Like remember that was like before Witcher 3, so like nobody knew what CD Projekt was. This was like, oh, the real guys. Um, yeah, so they offered relocation and some help settling in Canada. So me and my wife decided, hey, yeah, it's gonna be a cool adventure. And we moved. We moved to Toronto. And I'm here 10 years now. Something that was supposed to be a short adventure turned out to be a new way of living. Yeah, so when I joined Ubisoft, what game did you work on? Oh, The Witcher 2. Oh, The Witcher 2. I didn't hear of it. But then, like 6 months later, The Witcher 3 came out, and everybody was like, oh, you're the Witcher guy. Tell us how you guys did this, how you guys did that. Yeah, that was a shift in perception. That was pretty cool.
Nice. Good timing, though. Good timing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I worked on the Watch Dogs series. It was open world action game, pretty cool. I worked on the second and the third one for a little bit. Um, then I worked for Epic just a little bit. Uh, and after that, I joined Google to work on Google Stadia, which was very successful, as you know. Uh, it was my first encounter with like American big tech companies, and all those stories that you hear about how working at Google is great. It is really great. Uh, it was fun times, but at some point Stadia shut down, and I really want to stay in the games. So yeah, I just went on the internet, found a job listing for Blizzard, and yeah, I found that they have an opening on the Diablo team, which is like one of my favorite games of all times, Diablo 2. Uh, I got an interview, I got a job, and yeah, I'm here for 2.5 years now, and I love it.
Nice. Nice. At which point did you start to graduate from the gameplay engineering to more like engine stuff, engine work?
I think I was always more interested in engine. This is like coming back to my emulators adventures and just like understanding how processors execute codes and stuff like that. Like it is more I'm gonna say straightforward. Gameplay is more connected to design. There's like more experimentation, and there's a lot of people that really enjoy it. For me, it's like, hey, I want to code run fast, efficient. I love working with consoles and platforms. So
Okay, okay. So maybe tell us what is your role now at Blizzard? What do you do?
Uh, I'm one of the engine leads. So the team at Blizzard is a bit bigger than originally at CD Projekt, right? So we have a lot of people, and to make things go smoothly, we have more managers. So I'm one of the leads that is responsible for some very specific engine systems, like animation, VFX, platforms.
Okay. One thing that uh, I think is like very interesting to people looking from outside, you hear a lot about this like secretive aspects of engines with these AAA companies, and but then you have like engines that are right there, like Unreal and Unity, or even Godot for like the smaller projects. If you zoom out and take a like a bird's eye view, what would be the differences between these engines that are general purpose out there that you can take and use, and these engines like Blizzard engine or other engines you've worked on? How they differ?
Um, yeah, maybe I'm gonna touch a little bit on the secretive stuff. I don't think it's on purpose. It's not like we do anything like super secret and super crazy. Maybe back in the days, everybody tried to get like competitive advantage over competitors. But now, like, hey, if you want to steal some code, steal Unreal. Like it's out there. You can go to GitHub and download their code. They do state of the art things. So if you want to learn how to write a AAA engine, it's out there. You don't have to try to go and sneak and hide things. It's more like, you know, um, probably you spoke with like, open source maintainers and stuff. It's an effort to put code base out there that like looks decent,
Oh yeah.
people can use it, can see it. It's just nobody has any how do you say that? Um, Nobody really wants to put work into it in AAA, and you have companies like It's Software that they're gonna release their own source code to the public. But it's still, I guess, it's a lot of work for them, like to go through the code, make sure there's nothing crazy there, right? Do you have to involve like your legal department? What if they put a swear word? So like it's just work that somebody has to do, right? So that's why you don't really see a lot of like AAA companies being more open about it. Uh, on the other hand, like if you go to GDC or watch any conferences or even like GDC Vault or videos that are on YouTube, people are very open about sharing stuff. They're amazing talks from guys from CD Projekt, from Naughty Dog, from Insomniac, that or Ubisoft, that they go really, really deep about how their engine works. It's not source code, but if you know what they're talking about, you can go and implement it yourself. So I know it's just only a part of your answer. It's like a bit segue. But coming back to your original question, what is the difference? I don't think there's really a difference. It's any engine from the companies that I work for, has the same components that are needed. And I'm gonna say, if it's the most similar would be Unreal Engine. Like it has all the things that AAA game needs to have. It has like a platform abstraction layer, so it has to run on multiple platforms. It's gonna have all the content importing stuff. Uh, it's very similar. Obviously, each company has like their own way of doing things that are mostly like targeted for their games. So for Diablo, for example, we are doing like an isometric view game. So we can make a lot of assumptions about where's the camera gonna be, right? How we're gonna render things. Like we don't have to worry about rendering sky or clouds. And those are just like silly examples, but that's basically it.
Okay. So you can limit the functionality of a general purpose engine to your particular needs and don't worry and waste effort on doing it. Okay. What about if you're using an engine in a team that is large and especially with the like a group of other teams, so you need to have, let's say, the engine needs to be sort of structured in a way that other people can reuse that and not mess up other people's work. So are there any things that you do on a daily basis to make this engine work for multiple teams?
So the way we use engines at Blizzard is that every single team, game team, have their own technology. We don't have a centralized Blizzard engine, so you're gonna have a Diablo engine, an Overwatch engine, uh, you know. So we on the Diablo team, we don't have to worry about like Overwatch folks and vice versa. Um, that your question?
Okay. I was also thinking about like if you have a Diablo team specifically, right? Uh, how much okay, Unreal Engine has a lot of reputation, but also has like documentation, tutorials, and stuff like that. So other people can learn how to use that from these sources, right? And within the company, it's a bit different. So is there some specific tooling around other people learning how to use the engine or stuff like that?
Yes, that's a good question. There's always less documentation that we would like, um, and the reason one of the reasons is that things change. I'm not gonna say constantly, but we're always trying to improve things. So something that was written a year ago might not be really up to date. So the way we try to handle it is basically, each team, let's say VFX artist, they will have their own like piece of documentation and their tutorials about specific parts of the engine uh, that they use to onboard new people. And if something changes, obviously engineers work with them to let them know, hey, we have this new feature. But it's like usually it's the other way around. It's like they want to have a feature and they're gonna like work with the engineering and say like, hey, we wanted this built this way because we found that if we do this way, it's gonna save us like an hour a day, right? It's like, okay, yeah, let's do it. So it's more fluid. We use chat every single day. So, as you can just message a person, right? Or we have like help channels that you can, hey, I'm trying to do this in the engine. How do I do it? And you have, dozens of people being able to respond.
Okay. Okay. Uh, are there any specific subsystems that you would like to highlight from the engine to talk a little bit about?
Uh, Not maybe engine subsystems, but what I think people we find interesting is when you work in this big team and work on a big game, it's not only the engine as like a software product, right? It's like all the infrastructure and processes around it. So like for example, this is pretty obvious, but I don't think indie do that too much, right? Like we have continuous integration services set up, right? So like whenever you submit code, there's a build machine that's going to build this code and make sure nothing breaks, right? Like we have automation that releases a new editor to all the content creators all the time, right? Like they have their own specialized launcher to download it to their machine. So it's very convenient for them. We have automated performance tests that, we know spots in our games that are tricky, and we can every night run some automated tests to make sure we doesn't break anything. We have graphics correctness tests that we have, some like rendered images that we know that they should look this way. And if graphics folks are working on graphics features, right, and they break something, we will get a notification, hey, this depth of field, like whatever gold image, how we call it, right,
Can
is
you
broken. You should fix it.
can you walk me through this in a little bit more detail? Like, you mean like you have a graphics test in a way, like you have a render from an engine, and you expect after some time of running an engine to have this exact image?
Yeah, yeah, you can, and I'm not gonna talk like super details because
Yeah.
first I don't know, and the second thing, I'm just gonna draw from like my general
Yeah.
experience over different companies, right? So the way you can build it is, it's treated as a unit test, right?
Okay.
So you can like render an image. And depending on what feature you want to test, it might be a bit different, right? And then basically, you have an automated way of just generating this image. And then you have like a nightly process that's going to check uh, correctness. And, it's usually not like pixel perfect, but you can have like a range of like, oh, more than 5% of pixel change.
Okay.
Uh, yeah.
Okay.
So again, like there's no like black magic or rocket science there. It's just all this tooling and processes that has been built just to make sure making the game is faster,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, in your experience so far, what have you liked the most? On which parts of the engine or tooling around it? What did you like working on?
Uh, I touched on that a little bit. I personally really like working with platforms, and especially porting to new ones. Uh, for example, one of my tasks for my team on Diablo 4 was we launched on Steam, and we wanted to the game to be Steam Deck compatible. So just one day you receive a Steam Deck from work for work related purposes only, of course. And you're like, hey, just make it work on this, right? So you go in, read documentation, implement all the APIs. I don't know, it's personally really rewarding for me, and you start seeing it, like on a new platform. This is really cool.
Okay. Okay. Nice. I'm wondering, uh, on the complexity part, what are the difficult parts of this type of work in a bigger companies, right? Because in the indie industry has their own issues, but the projects are usually smaller. If they are reusing some engine like Unity, only one thing can change, like Unity itself won't change. So you kind of work within this framework. And if you have a team, let's say a rendering team, engine team, gameplay team, there are lots of stuff that is moving around. So what are the complex parts of making games in this environment?
um, I'm gonna assume you're asking from the engineering perspective first,
Yeah.
right? So the skill that you definitely have to possess is being able to navigate huge code bases. Because you ask about documentation. I'm gonna go on a limb and say nobody has perfect documentation out there, right? And even Unreal, even though they have pretty good documentation. So what you what your day is going to look like is you're going to launch Visual Studio and go. Sure, you're going to have people that you can ask about things like, hey, I want to fix this bug with footsteps. Where should I go? Right? And some more seasoned engineer might say, oh, look inside this class. But that's kind of like, if you get that, that's great. And usually this is as far as, you know, you are expected to be given advice as like a mid-level senior engineer, right? And you go there and you basically have to figure out how things work, right? So, part of the skills that you learn over the years of development, it's to figure out how things work. So you will probably find some like, English text that makes sense to you. Put a breakpoint there, right? Run a game, see where you came there. And this is gonna take you like 85% of the time to figure out what's going on and why. And then like fixing a bug is just like, oh yeah, it's easy. And you would think that over the years, you will just like build enough this knowledge that it's gonna be easy for you. But that's never gonna happen because, like, first of all, the engine is always changing, and the it is so big that you just cannot be an expert in every single part of it. Like, you will build like a mental model of it, right? So yeah, I know, like, this is how we render, right? And we have, let's say, 4 threads. I kind of understand what they do, so it will like allow you to navigate towards an area, but it's very rarely that, oh, I know where to fix it, you know?
How often does it change? Like, how often the code changes within some parts of the engine? Like, I can imagine that rendering, obviously, like, if there is a rendering team that is working on some new features, like this will change. But the graphics pipeline once set up, I would expect it to somewhat be
Right.
there.
So I don't have like specific numbers, but the easy way to think about it is, if you have 10 programmers, right? And you pay them money, you expect them to write code, right? So they're gonna write code every single day. And most probably, they're gonna submit some code every other day, right? And like, this can scale to 100 programmers or 200 programmers, like how many your company has, right? So you'll easily get tens of change lists every single day. And sure, some are going to be like small bug fixes, especially like later in the game development. But at the beginning, hey, we're working on new features, so there's constantly churn of code going in and out.
Okay. So yeah, so you're stuck with your like you need to have a good mental model, but you cannot really rely on knowing something. If you really understood how something works like 6 months ago, it's not necessarily up to date
Yeah,
today.
and there's no Stack Overflow or YouTube or Udemy course that you can go and learn, right? Like, you have this, as I said before, you have access to every single person on a team. So you can ask them if you know who to ask, but you also don't want to be this person that's gonna like constantly asking questions, because like ultimately we all have the game to make. uh so and of course this is different for like interns and juniors, and like, this is how they learn, right? But as a like mid-level or senior person, you're just like, yeah, here's the code. Uh, Go figure it out.
Okay. Uh, Side note: for the version control for engines, is Git often used?
From my experience in triple A's, never.
Okay.
It's all purpose.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Um, I think, yeah.
Okay. Okay. What about the complexity on the non-technical part? Because you alluded to that there is a lot of complexity there as well.
Oh, where do we start? Um, I have this funny way of explaining triple A game production. So think of a train that goes in like full speed, and you cannot really stop a train or change it rapidly, right? It's like it just goes. So, and if you like, when you're working on the engine, you're kind of like laying tracks in front of the train, and like, you know, think of features are like people that like jumping on the train, on the running train. So, you know, you're gonna hear that, all the AAA companies have like lots of producers. Those are people who like don't produce content. Their just only job is to make sure that the train, keeps going. And so like you plan all the features like way ahead of time. And like there's a very simple explanation of it. Like when you're just by yourself, you can say, "Hey, I'm working on this today. When I finish this, I'm gonna work on that. Oh, maybe I need to like add, let's say, new animation, right? Oh, I need to write some tech first. Like this is like very easy. It's like, single core CPU. You can like fully understand what's going on. But as soon as you start adding people, like you don't want them sitting around and like waiting for stuff, right? So if you have an 3D artist, you want him, to be productive, and he also wants to be productive. He wants to create art. So you need to have a place where to put this art. So you need to like figure out first, how monsters in the game should work, right? So how should they work? Well, maybe we should have some concept artists. So now you have like a concept artist earlier, right? And maybe before concept art, we should have some story. So you should have, and you start building this huge dependency graph of interactions and all those things that just have to go smoothly. And then, I'm going to say it's easy, but it's of course not easy. It's easier when you have like a single player game that you release at some point, then maybe you patch it, and that's good, right? And if you're Larian, you're gonna say we're not doing DLCs because it's boring. It's like, yeah, cool, you're done at some point, right? But with live game like Diablo 4, we release seasons every like 3 months. So each season is like a small release, right? So here's the content we want to have. All those people need to make the content, in time. So, we're constantly thinking like 3 seasons ahead, like 4 seasons ahead. And, at some point, players don't like this or maybe like this more. So you get this feedback, and players gonna say, "Oh, Blizzard doesn't listen." Like we listen, but we cannot like stop everything which we're doing right now, right? Like we can make those changes like a little bit in the future. So I say like this is very different from like an indie game development when you can say like, "Hey, I can be more agile." Here we have, hundreds of people working on this game, and we cannot just go out and say like, "Hey, you know what? We are like pivoting direction to something else," because everybody was like, "What are we gonna do?"
So in this case, if you're, let's say, as an engine lead, if you were to give a direction and recommendation, let's say I want to start a new game and reuse the engine. where I should start the work on an engine in like a hypothetical timeline in order to be somewhat ready for all the departments to actually start to produce stuff within this engine, because like it would seem like the engine should come first, and I'm assuming it's rarely the case that you can like match that, like, oh, here's like 3 years to work on an engine and then we'll start to do the content.
Yeah.
So how would you
Uh,
what would you do, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, normally, in like AAA productions, you have different stages, but like broadly, it's like pre-production, production, and like back fixing and polish, right? And pre-production is where you are trying to figure out what the game is, what the game is going to be, and test different prototypes. I think we call it finding the fun, but like other people also call it this way. And then like production is, you can imagine like conveyor belt of, we know what the game should be. We know, like how many monsters, how many quests, what's the story, how many cutscenes, and we just like sit down and make content. And then like, post production or like polish and bug fixing is that, okay, game is fully playable. Maybe it's not performant. There's a lot of bugs. It's like where we fix all of those. So coming back to your question, you try to start your pre-production small, so you don't have this huge beast to feed, right? So companies would usually, spin off like a small team to prototype new title while the old one is still in development, right? So, let's say I'm polishing the game A, which means that, engineers are busy, maybe designers are busy with polishing gameplay and balance and all this stuff. But maybe, writers and concept arts folks are more free to do some like early exploration and stuff like that. And the same with the tech, right? You In a hypothetical situation, right? Like you can make a decision of which engine do we want to use? Do we want to use like off the shelf engine like Unity or Unreal? Do we want to use existing tech? Do we want to start something from scratch, right? So this is when those conversation would happen. And the prototypes would be made in like a previous tech usually, because it already works, people know it. And at the same time, there's going to be conversations. How do we want the new tech to look like?
Okay. Okay. Um, this is this is I still have this image of train running forward, and I can't get rid of it now, because like I don't know how I would operate in such an environment, to be honest, because it is both like, it seems like if you're laying tracks in front of the train, it's very difficult to get it done right. And you can have performance tests and all the other tests in place, but you don't have tests for the content that you're still missing, right? So,
Yes.
um, what did you found? What did you find that was working in terms of like quality assurance, but on this like bigger level, like making sure that engine will hold up for all the needs of the teams that will be there to add both like content and like systems and maybe like tooling around it, like editors, all the custom editors that people need to create. Like how do you know that the engine will handle this piece of work planned?
You never know. And also to touch on what you said, like you are never done also, right? And this is, I don't think it's very specific to triple A's. It's like with games in general, you are never finished. At some point, you just have to ship it because you either run out of time or run out of money, or you just want to be done with the project, right? So, um, big companies help with that a little bit. Is that your schedule is usually fixed, right? And so it gives you like, okay, we need to release by then. And sure, usually you will hear that maybe a launch slipped by a few months, but that's kind of it. Like most companies cannot really afford of, like spending millions of dollars more on the game, because it's simply not gonna be profitable later, right? Um, there are some exceptions, we're all waiting for GTA 6. And that's gonna be, I'm sure it's gonna be amazing game that will push the limits of tech as each of their games did. Because this is what they do. They're gonna say, like, you know what, we're gonna spend as much time possible to make the tech perfect. And that's great. That's awesome. Not every company can do that. Not everyone has, such as like successful product that can like fund future products like as long as we want, right? So yeah, it is hard. There's also, um, I'm sorry, I forgot what the original question was.
About the quality assurance for like making sure that the engine will handle all the needs of the production.
Mm, yes. So I said, you never know. You kind of like try to um, improve as you go, right? So, of course, the most important part is the stability. Like, this is a no-brainer. Like, if the editor crashes and people cannot use it, it's bad. So, that's where a lot of like automated tests, unit tests come in, manual tests with QA too. You know, uh, Ubisoft was this great example of having like studios across the world. You could have people testing your editor like overnight. I mean, like during your night, but it was day for someone else, right?
Okay.
So when you get to work, you kind of like, okay, it was like, they run bunch of tests. It's stable enough. You never have like 100% coverage, of course, too, right? But then you will find, oh, this is often crashing. So we'll just add it to our tests, whether like automated or not. So it's like this constant improvement of trying to get there, right?
Okay. That's a different world. Like just the test suits that don't need to pass all to to like still be stable enough is from like say my maybe more web devy kind of world. It's like a wild thing to do, but you have much more like complexities and weird features and like branching stuff and like here's a sub component, right? Like here's a window and here's like a piece of system that is doing something, and you can use the standalone like engine without doing this system. So I understand that this is the difference. But uh if you were to like halt the entire train for a couple of, I don't know, days or months, and you're like, now I have the time to fix stuff. Like nobody's touching it. Like nobody's requiring for this engine to be like stable, and you have like 3 months. Are there features like in the back of your mind, like, oh, I would definitely need to do this, like redo something from scratch or stuff like that? Is there something that is like very difficult to now, uh, to put now because everybody's using it, but it would be great to do it like a couple of months ago, stuff like that?
Uh, you know, there's always things that if we have, time, we could improve things, and it will be mostly towards like user-facing features.
Okay.
There's some editors that we know are like a little bit cumbersome, but like to improve them, it's more just to add like a few controls here and there. Um, but I also learned that this running train, the upside of this is it really allows you to focus. because like when you think of it, you have this like huge code base, right? And you have freedom to do whatever. You will most likely spend weeks or months going in a rabbit hole that maybe interested you, or you're gonna like, oh, there's this like design pattern that I really like to use. Maybe I will refactor everything so it's cleaner, right? And you're gonna do all this engineering work. And at the end of the day, did it make the game better? You know, probably not. So having this like running train and tight deadlines really allows you to like evaluate whether work is important or not. And I don't want to say, tech debt is not important. It is, but when it surfaces to the point that it cripples your work, right? Like there's one, two, or three engineers saying like, guys, like this is like I cannot work with this anymore. It's so spaghetti that it takes me forever to find anything, right? Now okay, we should improve it, right? And we're gonna sit down with a whole group and we'll try to figure out how to do it efficiently and what is the best way of doing this. And at this point, you at least have this feeling that it is important. It will improve, people productivity, rather than, oh, I'm just gonna wander, and find something that I don't like. Um, that's why also like in bigger companies, you won't find a lot of like flame wars about like tabs versus spaces or naming conventions. It's like people usually don't care if there's if there's established ones, we will just continue to use it forever. you know
Yeah.
i I think this is like how Unreal started. They started using a convention. You might like it or not, but there's never going to be a good time to like change your entire code base. Maybe with with some AI tools now that you can say, I'll just change all the naming convention to something. Sure. But like you would never put engineering work towards it, right?
Okay. That's a
So to answer your question, like in a really, really good way, if you give me, let's say, two engineers and 6 months, the first thing I would do is I would go to our designers and artists and it's like, what do you need?
okay. Okay.
Rather than go back and then try to improve the tech just for the tech uh,
Nice.
side of
Nice.
things.
That's a very healthy lens of looking at the unstoppable train, I think. Can you tell me a
Yeah.
little bit? So in engines, you often have the scripting layer to help everybody to add functionality, but without the need to dive into the engine itself and build it from scratch and stuff like that. You are on the other side, like you probably like C++ and you feel very much at home when working with C++. So what do you think about, generally speaking, the scripting languages and also the visual scripting languages for engines? Is it useful? Does it make sense to have this like additional layer that would be easier for other people to use? Or like if you were to, let's say, stick to like C++, sane C++, would it be better? Like what's your take on this?
I think if you look at the game industry in general right now, like big companies are moving away from scripts. I think, back in the early 2000s, this idea of having a scripting language that is more safe and is faster to iterate was interesting. But I think a lot of companies, and including us at CD Projekt, we found that, to write a good script, you have to know how to program anyway. Because even though we use like custom scripting language, it was not very different than C. And yeah, you didn't have to worry about like pointers and stuff, but you would still have to know what you're doing. So, depending on the tech saviness of the designers, you could have like triple nested for loop that iterated over all entities in the game because they wanted to find, a guy with a sword, right? And it worked. It was very, very slow, but it worked. And I think that's the danger with like scripting languages. Like you say, oh, you don't need a programmer, but then like nobody looks at it from like a programming point of view unless it's too late. So that's why I think, things like blueprints or other visual languages are more interesting. Although blueprint is this like weird thing that you can really go like super low level with it, which I find a bit weird. Like you can literally get a vector, split it to like three things, and this is something I could write like this, right? In C++. Uh, so I think there's a balance, and visual scripting is like really good to design like quest flows, conversation flows. This is what CD Projekt does. They have like the whole diagram of how the conversation can go. It's useful for shaders. I think this is kind of like industry standard now that every single engine, including ours, have like a shader graph that you can like easily visualize what each node will do. But for gameplay stuff, I think you know it depends. Now there are also like very good tools that allows you to like live recompile your code. Um, which means that if you're a gameplay programmer in C++, you can still like rewrite big chunks of the code and change the logic, and then just like hit a hotkey in Visual Studio, and it will just like update your code magically, which is awesome. So I think you're not gonna see a lot of like scripting languages integrated in triple A's. And like with indies or like off the shelf engines like Unity with C Sharp or Godot with GDScript is different because the assumption is that you never compile your engine, right? So you treat your engine as something that you downloaded, and then if you want to do stuff with it, yeah, like you have to script because like what is the other way? While in AAA, unless you're just like a artist or designer that kind of like put things from blocks, you have your code base right there. Like you have your Visual Studio, you hit F5. So if you need to change anything, it's right there, and it's like very easy to change. So that's why you don't really need scripting languages anymore.
Okay. Okay. I wanted to ask you about how how the development differs of a live service game like Diablo compared to the single player game. You kind of alluded to this earlier that like after shipping the game there's still the game that you need to worry about. But how does this influence the development in general?
I think it's mostly, the train that we've been talking about. Like for Diablo 4, the train is still running, right? Like we are going full speed towards releasing expansion next year. And it's going to be, huge amount of content with new campaign, new things for players, right? So you still have all those departments basically working on a new game, right? And this is like similar to like releasing DLCs for single player games. Uh, Again, sometimes you read players not being happy about like DLCs that contain like things that were cut from the game, but they were cut for a reason. Like, hey, we needed to ship on time, We just don't have enough, time or people to polish those parts. So while the train is still running, we will just continue to work on it and then release it to players after, right?
Is there something that changes regarding like the server infrastructure and the stuff that you need to run like 24/7? How does this influence the engine and programming in general?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And actually, if you want to talk about how Diablo engine is built towards this very specific game, it's mostly its multiplayer architecture. Because it's a multiplayer game that is, online all the time. We have to run the servers, and a lot of effort goes into make those servers, most efficient, so we can handle, as many players as possible. So, our entire like multiplayer online layer is built around being efficient for Diablo. It's not gonna work for first person shooters. It's not gonna work for MMOs. It works for Diablo because we want players, to have like the least latency, the best experience, and have a lot of people playing at the same time.
Okay, okay. Uh, is it not, if it's not okay to ask, let me know. But what is the like the critical part in terms of performance? You're saying that like if server needs to run like a host as many players as possible, then you need to reduce the performance, and usually you do this by like isolating some bottlenecks and trying to work on the bottlenecks. So what would be the performance heavy parts for Diablo?
Um, I don't think there's a general answer for
Okay.
this because it changes all the time, right? So, like, part of our job as engine programmers is we profile all the time. And, sometimes it's going to be, like too many monsters on screen. Sometimes it's going to be too many VFX on screen. Um, we had cases that we had too many sounds, right? So those are the things that, and it's different for like client performance and server performance, because on the server you don't get any of like graphics and sounds, but on the other hand you have all the monsters AI pathfinding and all those things, right? So that's always changing. Like what let's say I'm gonna use a random example, pathfinding, right? Maybe it works great when you have 10 monsters, but then somebody decided that it's gonna be super cool to have 100 monsters, and now it's not okay, right? And maybe it's okay if you have one player in the game, but then three friends join and it's bad. So one of the things that you learn working on those big projects is that there's almost never the right thing to do things. Like, there's no one good sorting algorithm. There's none one good container like hash map versus sorted map, or a vector. Like, it always depends. So, whenever you ask like a senior engineer, like, what is the best way, they're always gonna answer, it depends. Right. And those are the things that, because our game is changing, we learn all the times. And also, it's not like you can spend 2 months to write like one function like super, super efficient, right? So the way you do it is usually write the best way so it's, understandable and like clear. And then if it becomes a problem, it shows up in a profiler, you'll go in, it's like, oh, okay, I understand what they're trying to do. Let me just improve it so it handles, 200 monsters. um, because again, it's all about like train and resources. Like if you spend a month writing a perfect memory allocator in, I don't know, potions menu, right? That is like nanoseconds fast, but nobody ever uses the potions menu, or maybe it doesn't really matter. It's just like you spend your time wrong, right? So there's a lot of emphasis of like putting your engineering bugs in the areas that matter, and is it like either for players or for the content people?
How do you find those areas that matter? Do you know them up front?
Very rarely you know them up front. Like with experience you have some ideas, right? So like uh there are people on my team that will tell you why we cannot have 1,000 monsters, right? Like they will probably have an idea. Oh, we know those parts of the frame are slow, so when there's a design coming, it's like, hey, we really want to have 5,000 monsters, right? So we're gonna have, okay, so those are the areas that we probably look into. So sometimes but a lot of the time you don't, and it's okay. It's okay because that's why you have all those tools and all those like automated tests that can show you, and so you actually make good decisions that are data driven rather than guessing, which is way 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 better than I think it's gonna be this, so let me spend 2 weeks on improving this function that is never called, right? So this is what we do. We just hey, if it's Xbox Series S, we'll just run the game there. We will find a spot that we know is troublesome. We will run a profiler. We'll see with our own eyes what is slow, and then we'll address it.
Okay. The train analogy should be part of like CS curriculum for the big companies, I think, because it's very relevant, and I never heard it this put it this way. And now when I like relate this in my back of my mind to my experiences, it is very helpful. Like even to just understand what is happening within a big company with software. Just like you can like maybe like dislike it. That's not the case, but like just for the sheer understanding of it, and this is very healthy to have in mind. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to,
And
yeah.
I think it's also easy to compare it with like big Hollywood productions, right? Um, this is how they operate too, and you can dislike it and say, oh, I really don't like that they planned already like 6 Marvel movies for 2027, right? Because I don't even know if I want to watch them. But like if you think about like how much work is needs to be put in each of those films, it's just like the only way to make it work, and also like have money to pay people, because that's also important, right? Like we all love games, but it's also like our job. So we like stable paycheck. Nobody likes to crunch. So we that's why we have to like plan ahead.
Okay. Ooh, when you have an engine that is built in-house, does it help you with some kind of tooling that would be impossible to do with the engine, like Unity or Unreal? Like, do you have in mind some systems that you have been using in the past or now, where like because of this was like in-house tech and you could influence it really deeply, you could build like this like syncing stuff between computers or servers or stuff like that? Like, is this something that you ever come across?
I don't think it's a matter of impossible. It's just a matter of how easy is to add things. I'm going to give you an example of ray tracing that we added to Diablo 4 at some point, right? Like if we were using off-the-shelf engine that doesn't have ray tracing, um, we could either say like, nope, it's not possible, or we will try to find a way how to like retrofit ray tracing into one of those engines, which is still viable, and a lot of companies will do something like that. But then there's a risk of, hey, there's a new version of the shelf engine. And like, what do you do with your changes, right? Like, it's it's hard, and it's makes some of those decisions harder, while fully controlling our own tech. It's just a matter of time and money for us. If we think that, hey, it's gonna be cool for the players, we can schedule it ahead of our train, and we can just do it. We can do whatever tech we want. We can have our graphics programmer read papers. uh they do, because they're passionate about what they do, right? They're gonna watch GDC talks, and they're gonna say, hey, I want to implement this really cool tech. And they're gonna do it, and it's gonna be amazing. While when you have like off the shelf engine, you're kind of like, you can still do it, but the amount of work and friction will be way, way bigger.
Okay. Okay. All right. I would be now moving away from the engine side, maybe like in the particular, to the sort of opinion corner about programming languages and stuff like that, like the nerdy stuff. So,
Sure.
do you have anything that you would like to add on the topic of engines that we missed out on?
Let me just gather my thoughts for a little bit.
Sure. We talked a lot about differences in from the engine side and engine team, and how the engine team works compared to like the indie games. We talked a little bit about the differences between AAA and indie games, but on the engine side, we can also talk about like the human side, like how your life is different in a AAA company compared to like indie.
Oh, we can. Sure. Before we jump into that, I want to say something actually about like proprietary engines, and I hope that they are not going away. You can see like more and more companies using Unreal, and I think one of my like personal sad moments is when I learned that CD Projekt Red is moving away from their Red engine, because like if you played Cyberpunk, like this game looks different. I think a lot of the specialness of this game is the way how it looks, how it feels. And I think, you know, when you have to create your tech from scratch, even if you're, using like a common algorithm, you always gonna get something different. It's like a painter. You can, you know, every person will paint even the same thing a little bit different. And I think you can see that. Like you can see that Unreal Engine games look similar to each other. And again, it's not because you cannot do custom stuff. It's just like your incentive of doing custom things is really low. Like Unreal already has depth of field, right? Unreal already have volumetric fogs. Unreal already has this, and that. And it's very easy to say, yeah, let's just use it. It looks good, right? It probably looks great, but it also looked the same in every single game, right? While if you just say to a bunch of, you know, um, good and passionate engineers, please implement a volumetric fog for me, they'll just go and do crazy things that, with the results that might be slightly different. So that's what I really like about proprietary tech. And I hope, it's not going away for triple A's. So like fingers crossed.
It also must be like it must feel like entering a new world if you come to the company and they're like, "Oh, here's our giant a decade old engine constantly being improved on and developed, and it's like a whole living thing. Like it's from the point of view, like even as a sort of experiment, it's a very interesting thing to be able to work with such tech, right?
Yeah. And it requires skill. I think Jonathan Blow is very vocal about, programming skills going away, because, of all those things that we built on top of each other, right? So you can, in a very, specific way, imagine a world that only Epic hires engine programmers anymore, because everybody else just uses their tech, right? So
It
yeah.
is, yeah. It is kind of the direction that is going in, at
Yeah.
least for the time being. But you know, all right.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so what I wanted to talk about, and I don't know how we can maybe fit it in somehow in this
okay.
conversation, is I think what is interesting about triple A's that people don't always get is that, if you start your game career in at a triple A company, you immediately have access to all those like amazing people that can help you and teach you, rather than like spending time on your own, trying to go through YouTubes and courses. um, and I think this is like really, really valid. Like for me, I started as a junior at CDPR. I knew nothing about making games, like literally nothing. And the first few months were terrible for me. I had no idea what's going on. I made some stupid mistakes that everybody made fun of me. But that was like an expedited way of learning, because you just work with those amazing people. And I think this is really, really good way of learning how to program, just working on a big project and learn from all those seniors and principals. And at the same time, people, if you search YouTube, there's a lot of, oh, I want to make my dream game. It's gonna be about this and that. um and what is hard about that is you usually are passionate about like one thing. So maybe you're an artist, maybe you're a designer, maybe you're a programmer. But then, especially if you're a programmer, you always complain like, oh, but I don't know any, graphics person, or I don't know any sound person. When you're working at a company at Blizzard, there are, abundance of very skilled people, right? So I really enjoy programming. I really enjoy low level programming. So I can do my job. I can do it very well. I can, be very satisfied by it. And at the same time, I know that other people will also do their job really well, right? Uh, I know that our game is going to have amazing arts. I know our game is going to have amazing sound. I know that we have an amazing marketing team that will market the shit out of. We're probably not gonna say shit. We'll market a lot of the game, right? That I don't have to worry about. I don't have to worry about like setting up my Steam page. How many wishes do I have? I couldn't care less about it, right? I'm gonna go and see Diablo 4 ad at Times Square, right? And those are like the really proud moments, like, yes, I'm working on this. I think this is very different from like an indie experience. And I definitely, appreciate the feeling that, hey, I built something myself. I put it out there. There maybe are people or a lot of people playing it. That's cool. But, for me, sure, I didn't do it myself. I'm a part of a huge team, but I work on a game that is being played by millions of players every single day. And I work with amazing people that are best at what they do. And it's just like this wheel of excitement, So I think that's a important message to get out there for folks that are considering starting in a game industry, that, indie path is one thing, which is great, but also, this corporate boring thing that drains your soul. It's also really good if you really just want to do what you enjoy doing and don't worry about anything else.
When we're on this topic, if you join a triple A company, what would be your sort of advice as of the strategy you should have, maybe as an engineer? Because you can imagine that one strategy, and often people do that, is like, oh, I need to prove myself. Here's like 80 hours a week in the coding and like not talking to anyone and like coding and showing how good of a coder you are. But also the more senior you get and the more like responsibilities you have in the team, you kind of realize, oh, you need some networking. You need to know these people. You need to understand how they work. So is this the same thing in the AAA industry? Is this like, what would be your advice how to think about joining a bigger company like that? How to structure your kind of life and the day?
Yeah, of course it's gonna be different for like entry level positions and for seniors. So let's maybe start with juniors and entry level. I agree. I think you need to prove yourself. But it's not, as you said, like spending 80 hours a week. I think, for the engineers, it's usually like some side projects or like hobby projects. I said that, I was writing my own emulator before I joined CDPR. Yeah, I send them to files like CPP files of my thing and a binary and like, hey, this is what I did, and they found it interesting enough to invite me for an interview, right? And nowadays it's the same. The bar is probably a bit higher because it's very easy to find information, but it's also not a lot of people are really willing to put in the work. So almost immediately when you get a resume with someone highlighting their like personal projects that are obviously like at some level, right? Like if you made a game in Unity and you're interviewing for a C++ engine position, that's probably not relevant. But if you wrote your own thing using SDL or whatever, that is like just a little bit more than two squares moving around, that's already interesting enough, because that means that, hey, you learned something by yourself. You were willing to put, an effort, and that's like really interesting for you. So that's kind of, people that companies are looking for, because like you cannot learn our engine outside of the company, right? So like we would never require Unreal knowledge or stuff like that. We will ask you questions about some like data structures and maybe basic 3D math. Again, depending on the position that you're applying for. But usually, like if you want to be an engine programmer and you could put together like a little game that does something, it means that you know enough to at least get an interview. So that would be my advice. In general, do whatever interests you and try to find a job in this area. Last year, we hired a junior programmer whose passion was modding N64 games. He's a great guy. He's who's making huge impact on the team. So even a weird hobby like that.
Okay. What about after you get a job? What would be your advice in terms of like how to think about being an effective employee, like productive employee? What would be the proper attitude to have in the company?
I'm trying to find a word that I can use that is not bad. Um,
Okay.
just like it's very easy. Just be a nice person that people enjoy working with. that's the only thing you need to do, right? Because ultimately everything can be learned, right? Like if you like, I'm not great at math, and I don't work in math. Uh, we have great engineers that are working on physics engine, on graphics, and it's like they're doing amazing job. I know nothing about it. If I had to, I will use a lot of Google and Stack Overflow to figure out things. Um, but like the point is, any skill can be learned. What cannot be easily learned is, like, as you said, like your attitude, right? So come to work with the expectations, treat people how you would like to be treated. Understand it's a job, so like you have work to do. With this comes benefits and responsibilities, right? And like ultimately, you know treat people as you would be stuck with them on a plane sitting next to them, right? Like this is like, I think it's called layover test. um People enjoy working with people that are enjoyable, surprisingly. uh and the game industry is not that big. So like if you ever had a chance to go to GDC or any other bigger conference, you will see that people know each other for like 10, 15 years from different companies. And this is how we make an impact, right? Like you work with a person, whether it's your boss or your peer, and they remember you. Hey, this guy was really fun to work with. He was doing his things, like, efficiently. He didn't complain. uh he or she, you know uh get stuff done. And that's how you make an impact, right? And then even, if your way split, the person moved to another company, and then you meet them, or you apply for a position that they can reference you. They're gonna say, yeah, yeah, this person is great. It's really great to work with them. So I don't think there's like a real magic for it. You don't have, like, at least in the companies that I was, privileged to work with, there was never, emphasis of like spending hours, or, like staying nights at the office, because ultimately, like, nobody cares. Everybody care about like things being done. So if you can make stuff done and you can fit it in 6 hours and then go home, that's fine. Everybody's gonna be happy.
All right. All right. I'm gonna ask you about C++. C++
Yes.
is a language with, I don't know, it's 25 years now. It has so many features, and on this podcast there were several people with various mindsets and attitudes towards C++ benefits and features. And what do you think about this language? What do you think about this language future? And would you see like a game engine with the scope of like a AAA company being written in a different language? Or do you think there are some rules that an engine team should follow in terms of like what features to use, what not to use, to make it easier to work with? What are your thoughts?
I think for me, and generally for us in games, programming language is just a tool. So we think of it as a hammer, right? Like you just use it to build stuff. So, yes, our engine is written in C++, but, all our automation, and stuff, we use Python. We even had some scripts in parallel. And our editor is written in C sharp. So basically, we are going to use a tool that we think is best for a given job. Um, I think what matters also a lot is how you efficiently can use this tool, right? So, like, if you use the hammer for 20 years, you're probably pretty good at it. So, I think this is where the strength of C++ plus plus is coming from. Is sure, it has its flaws. There's things that people don't like about it, including myself. But on the other hand, I've been using it for 20 years. I'm I'm not gonna say I know it pretty well, because C++ is like a scary dragon, especially in some like newer parts for me. But I know how to get stuff done with it. So it's gonna be like my go-to language for starting a new game engine or doing something, because I'm efficient with it, right? I know exactly how to do things. And it's going to take me an hour as opposed to 2 days trying to learn something new. And this is not to say that they aren't better alternatives out there. Maybe they are. But as long as you have, people working on games that have 20 years plus experience in working in C++, you're probably not going to change their minds, right? And so I think if you look at some newer programming languages like Zig, for example, or even Rust, it's perfectly possible that there are gonna be folks that learn it, they're gonna use it for 5, 10 years, then they're gonna write an amazing game engine in it, right? There's gonna start their own company, they're gonna hire more people writing in this, and they're self-building basically, a community around it. But I think it's gonna be like extremely hard to kind of like inject a language into an existing technology, just because it takes people to learn how to use them efficiently.
Yeah. Linux is now trying to incorporate Rust to more and more parts of the, like, it's not even in the kernel now. Now it's in the drivers, but it's mostly like Rust bindings. So they are in the huge C project that is trying to incorporate to the same project like Rust. And it's difficult. And it's difficult, especially on this like very nerdy low level stuff, how to pass data, with C having their own idea, C language having their own idea how to do it, and then Rust having how to do structure the memory and like how to pass around with the method and stuff like that. So yeah, okay.
I
If you were to,
I have a like small comment to that. There's a reason I mentioned Zig before Rust, because I think I see, like, in my crystal ball, I see more success with like game specific languages, like whether it's Zig or Jai, coming from Jonathan Blow, that might be able to do something with games, because games are pretty specific, right? And I think I never written anything in Rust, so please treat all my opinions with a huge grain of salt. But what I heard about like memory safety, and the whole borrow checker thing, I think this is not what games need, right? Like, we we strive on treating memory as this like blob of things that we don't even know what is in there, right? And you're gonna laugh, but like the whole modern graphics stuff, it's built on top of, hey, here's a piece of memory that I'm passing from CPU to GPU, and in shader you're gonna decide what it is. Is it a texture, or is it a buffer, or is it a struct, right? So that's why I don't think languages that go towards like memory safety and stuff will impact the games that much. There might be something different, but we'll see.
okay. Have you used Zig or Jai?
No, no. I watched YouTube videos because I found it interesting. But I never used it personally.
Okay. Okay. There's also Odin. Odin has a similar syntax
Yes.
to Jai, and have a couple of similar concepts. So yeah, it's a bit nicer version for at least somebody who is like from out of this C world and is a bit drowned when they hear like, oh, const is not const, a const expert is const, and it's like, okay, so what the hell is const and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
I think, back to the point of running train, it takes a lot of effort to convince people to try something new just because, you know, entire programming on games is built on this paradigm of I'm launching my Visual Studio. Code shouldn't compile more than few minutes because otherwise I'm going to go and grab a coffee. But I'm hitting F5 and in a few seconds I have my game running on my Xbox or whatever console it is, right? And Visual Studio itself is not enough. So I'm gonna use some plugins for like code completion or things that make my life easier, right? So to convince me to switch to something else, you have to prove that it's better for me. And it has to be significantly better
yeah,
than my current workflow for me to even consider it, right? So, with all the love I have for the new programming languages, as there isn't a fully fluent integration with Visual Studio with syntax highlighting and code completion, when I hit F5 in runs of my Xbox, I'm not gonna look at it even, right? Because I don't want to launch like VS Code and try to figure things out or run a custom batch file or do stuff because it takes minutes from my very, very precious time on working on a game, right? So I think this is a huge barrier of entry for those technologies. That's why I mentioned, there has to be like a group of passionate people that just gonna build their own thing, and then after 10 years and 10 different GDC talks, they will prove to the game industry that it is worth trying, right? There's already tooling built for it. Just go and try, and then maybe they'll convince someone to try it. So that's why I think like C++ is pretty strong. All those new cool features are cool. Game industry is never gonna be super early adopters. But things, like coroutines and stuff like that, they're interesting enough and easy to integrate because hey, our compiler already supports it, right? That we can start trying those things way easier than switching to a new programming paradigm.
yeah. And again, like the uh, image of a running train at full speed is very helpful, right? Like because it's not because you are sitting comfortable in your armchair and you're like, oh, I don't want to switch because it's more like I have a train to catch and like it's
Yeah,
going really
exactly.
fast.
Exactly. So it's never going to be about, oh, I like this or about I don't like that, right? It's like way different discussions to have.
And if we're nerding out on programming languages, we might as well I might as well ask you about the code editor. As Visual Studio has a fanatical uh, opponents, and game industry is rooted in Windows and Visual Studio. And is it possible? Like, have you come across in AAA people not using Visual Studio, either like going Vim or some other text editor to actually work, or is it just like Visual Studio? Please don't ask this question again.
No, no. I just smiled when you said Vim,
Yeah.
because I would say Vim is like super hardcore level. Um, you know what I said before? I want my code to run on my Xbox in few seconds, right? Um, I've seen JetBrains
Yeah.
Rider, making some headwaves, especially in like Unity development part. Um, they're also, I believe, working on proper console support. So I think, they're investing very heavily just to provide what I say to you. They're gonna say, hey, we have this editor that is in those ways better than Visual Studio and does all the things you want, right? Um, we like our team is pretty open to like we don't mandate people what should they use. So if someone really, really wants to use Vim, they can. Like nobody will stop them. It's just, we're not gonna put any effort of making development easier with Vim. So then you're gonna have to ask yourself a question. Okay, does my familiarness with Vim and all the manual scripting I have to do to make it, integrated with what we have, it's worth my time and effort? Does it make me so much faster, right? And like to be fair, Visual Studio is not that bad. Like it's not great, right? But like, hey, what software nowadays you can say is great? I think the recent versions, and by recent I mean everything after I don't know, like 2006 or something, are stable, are fast enough. Again, there's a whole like console SDKs integration, plugins, ecosystems. And by plugins, I mean, things that like visual assists that's been around for like 15 years. And, I speak with developers and it's like, hey, there's something new that is better. Try it. And they said, you know what? I have like 15 years of my muscle memory. Like it's good enough for me, right? Um, so that's why it's Visual Studio because it's convenient, right? And everybody knows it. It works for all the platforms we support.
Yeah, the platforms part is very interesting, right? Because like one thing is to have your code editor running on your local machine and be able to add code, but the integration so that you can quickly run this on all sorts of platforms that you need your game to run, this is like another beast. And then you need like different tool chains sometimes to do that. And now you need to, like, if you're using Vim, you need to do everything yourself, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And then I'm
Yeah.
assuming with huge custom tech, your build process is also not that straightforward. Like you have some probably parts that are like built differently than other parts. And now after, let's say, years of investment into the tooling, you have it nice for Visual Studio, but
Yes.
not for anything else. Yeah.
Exactly. And like, to give you context, even Valve, to develop on Steam Deck, they invested in Visual Studio integration, right? So I can like literally put a breakpoint, hit F5, it will deploy to Steam Deck, uh, run Visual Studio server in their Proton emulation layer, and it magically works because they knew if they don't do it, like people won't debug on Steam Deck, right? So that's the same with yeah. I don't want to talk about more
Yeah.
companies.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Martin. This was super cool. Do you have anything that you'd like to close out on? Some maybe messages to young aspiring developers uh, learning difficult stuff or wanting to learn engine development, fighting with hallucinations from LLMs or stuff like that. Do you have anything to say to them?
Uh, yeah, for sure. I think we live in best times to learn anything. You have countless of hours of free tutorials on YouTube. You have multiple, sources of great documentation. There are open source libraries that help you with stuff. So just go and build. something, whatever interests you. I have a passion for emulators. I never finished, of course, but I started multiple emulators from scratch, just using resources out there. Uh, Before this talk, we talk about like Andres Klink a little bit and Serenity OS. I started building my own OS,
Nice.
inspired by Andreas' YouTube series. Uh, it's not hard. It's just the time you put in. And while you're doing those things, even if not like super related to your future game job, you learn how to solve problems and you learn how to debug, you learn how to understand how software is built. uh, that's why I don't think LLMs will help you. uh, you know in my personal projects, I use LLMs as I used to use Stack Overflow. I was like, okay, I want to have this control on screen in Dart. I have no idea how to do it. So what I would do previously, I would just go to Google and how to add a button in Dart, right? And yeah, first result will be Stack Overflow. I'll just go and copy a piece of code and hopefully it works. I can do that with LLMs and it's faster. It's a great tool, but it doesn't make me a better programmer, right? So I think there's no better way of learning programming just to write something from scratch yourself. Even though it's not efficient, even though it's single threaded, you don't have to have crazy entity component systems or like whatever is the new very popular term that we should have, right? Just build something, My first game was like a simple Pong that just like hit ball and destroy things. And that's it. And this is for programmers, but also like for if you want to be a designer, hey, you have three different engines that you can download for free. You have asset store with abundance of assets. Just start putting things together. As soon as you put something interesting, people will notice. And by people, I mean you don't have to, publish a game, but you put it on your resume and it's like, hey, this is what I built. And as I said, there's still not that much of people that actually create things. So as soon as you have something to show and share, you're already way ahead of people that just send their resume and saying like, "Hey, I'm a student. I'm looking for a job." Right. So that's my advice.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Marcin. This was super cool. Thank you so much for joining me.